When you travel on a ScotRail train, please be aware that by 2035 we will be carbon neutral. Rail travel is already the most sustainable form of public transport, contributing just 1% to Scotland's overall transport emissions.
It would, of course, have been cheaper to travel by plane, particularly as the UK government has just reduced air passage duty on internal flights, but John and I chose to take the train to COP26, or COP Glasgow as we prefer to call it, to find out more about what might be being done to avoid a complete climate and environmental catastrophe. We didn't have passes or any kind of access to the main conference, but we wanted to find out what people were thinking and saying.
We already knew that Jeff Bezos had an invitation, but not Greta Thunberg. Not a great start. It's COP26. What does that mean? COP. It's Conference of the Parties. Pretty bland. No mention of climate, coal, or anything important. And yes, there have been 25 previous ones. The first was 1995 in Berlin. Arriving in Glasgow Central, we asked our taxi driver what he thought of COP.
The way I see it is this: see, if they'd found a way of making profit out of saving the planet, they'd have done it sooner. But they're here because they think that we'll go, oh great, they're doing something about it, but they're not doing nothing about it, you know what I mean?
Meanwhile, another visitor was arriving in Glasgow.
Boris Johnson arrived in Glasgow to talk about climate change.
How many vehicles do you really need to move a US president around a city? Joe Biden's arrival failed to impress this Glaswegian.
It's shocking, it is. Shocking. Yeah, well, I counted 29, so 29 cars to escort one person. Shocking. Yes, and then falling asleep. Did they just come for a wee sleep?
While world leaders gathered behind miles and miles of perimeter fences, we walked the streets looking for other, more inclusive conferences. The conferences of the communities and peoples. It wasn't long before we found one.
All right, so, with the Canadian Bar Dance.
Glasgow is a city with heart, a city that values its artists, its people. It's got great parks, pubs, cafes, humour, electric buses and compassion. This is little Amal, who walked to Manchester all the way from the Syrian capital and came on to Glasgow to highlight the desperate plight of refugees, of which there will be many more as the climate crisis worsens. Homeless for another night, many people have gathered to help her.
We met Andrew, who's doing a PhD at Cambridge. He talked to us about climate justice, about how none of us are safe till we're all safe, about the need to invest in the global south.
All the time we're trying to fix climate change in the UK or the developed world. That's a good thing and it needs fixing, but we're exacerbating global inequality. And while we do that, we're inviting wars. We're inviting famine. We're inviting mass migrations. None of those things are good for us, let alone for them. It's in no one's interest to exacerbate global inequality. We've got to do that first.
Andrew wasn't talking about charitable aid here, but about how business can seed the investment needed, particularly in poorer countries.
If you're a company that's capable of building these assets wherever they are in the world, then the deal would encourage you to want to build things in the developing world first, because you get better terms
get better bloody return.
Yes,
tons of money.
Yes.
Wadges of cash, which is, if you're still into that, which you are, because your shareholders want it.
That's right.
You're going to make tons, of course.
And those companies, those same companies which today are pumping oil and gas, have an opportunity to make a lot of money out of doing the things that we want them to do.
We talked to Pen, one of the women from Brighton, presenting this brilliant visual challenge to the often hidden individuals and organisations destroying our planet.
I don't think anything that one particular person can do, any one thing, is going to make any difference whatsoever. You know, we've all signed petitions and written letters and everything for years. It's had no effect. I think the general there's a general shift in the culture and the attention on the climate. So I think that is what's going to make a difference. And I think the pressure from people in the last year or so has made a difference altogether. But it has to be a lot of people making a noise to make a difference.
Going to lots of different meetings in different venues all over Glasgow, we found that lots of the events were organised by younger people and people with real knowledge of the situation, scientists, economists, biologists, all sorts of people with real expertise. It gave us hope that the changes we need are possible.
Also pounding the streets of Glasgow, we found displaced Dora, heading off to meet her cousin Storm in the dockside area of Govan, a place with a great history of community strength and resistance. We found local people staging a musical welcome for Storm and her cousins, bringing inspired music and spectacle to the cause of saving the planet. They had much to tell us.
But we're joined today by the children of Govan here at the front. And by a whole group of people who've come from all over the country actually to sing with us this afternoon. Our song is written for the COP26 conference just across the river, and it's called Enough is Enough for two reasons. Enough is enough because it's time to sort this out, and enough is enough because we have to think collectively about what it means to have enough and to want more than you need. And if you're joining us for the first time this afternoon, we'd love you to join in with us. It's a song for many, many voices. This is Enough is Enough.
I mean, the reason a number of us are here today, we're singing as part of Soundhouse Choir, huge issues about climate change and about food security, and I suppose a change in the way that we manage the world. And it's not just about like recycling your plastic, it's about changing the way things are done, and it's about finance and big business, and it's huge. But I'm really glad there's so many children here. It was lovely to see so many kids here and singing as well.
If we're going to have a world that we can live in comfortably and equally share our resources amongst everybody, then this sort of thing has to happen, because the people that make the decisions are not making the right ones.
It's hard to know where they're acting from at the moment. There's nothing that's been drastically changed to address this, not one thing. So either they don't want to or they can't for whatever reason. They're bound by their interests.
Recycling or walking rather than getting in a car, even if it's just a school run, rather than just automatically hopping in a car. I think if everyone does just a tiny wee bit, then hopefully it has a big impact. Sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming and you feel this is too big, I'm too small to be any part of this, but it's maybe getting the message across that none of us are too small, all of us can make a difference.
Keep on walking and don't throw your rubbish.
Just I'm worried for my children and my grandchildren and their children and what kind of world they can possibly live in, and everything has to be shared out and protected for everyone and the next generation.
We're here to welcome Storm Little Mal to Glasgow. Our planet is getting hotter. If we don't stop it, then it will get much hotter than it's now. Wildfires, global warming.
Animals are slowly dying.
The sea levels are rising. Take action now. It's very bad because all countries are going worse and worse, and then it will be too hot for the country and people can't live anymore.
Stop polluting the seas. Using less plastic. Start reusing soft plastic and different renewables so nothing goes to waste. And to use electric cars.
Use renewable energy.
That's why we have to stop climate change, because the trees are being cut down.
Plant more trees. That's why all the MPs are here, to stop this.
No, this is our future. Grown-ups must help to help us. If we don't stop it now, then it will be harder to stop it later on in our lives.
They may not care as much as we do because we're going to be representing the future.
My understanding is that Trees for Life are planting trees in the old graving docks to offset the carbon impact of storms travels, and it's rewilding the ancient Caledonian forest. It's important that people sort of have a connection and value the importance of trees.
It was really moving to experience people's commitment to the value of trees, to the importance of nature, to the power of community, and to the wisdom of the young. As the day drew on, we headed back to the conference delegates gate, where people from all over the world were gathering to bear witness and to advocate change.
Our president is in the UK. We celebrate our participation in COP26.
Climate change? Oh, it's just the most important thing that there is. It's hard to sum it up, but just it's the entire world that we've completely ruined, and we need to reverse it. And it's so urgent and so catastrophic that it should be an emergency, and it should be, as much as the pandemic was, the reaction should be as strong for this.
We're leaving the world to a younger generation who, through no fault of their own, are going to suffer the consequences of the greed that is just rampant throughout the world, and without changing the system, from this completely headlong, mad rush to forever increased GDP on a finite planet with finite resources, nothing's really going to change.
Family back in Pakistan, and over the years the climate is changing to so much that the heat over there in the summer is explosive, and we have contributed to it to bring it to that level for the developing countries, and they haven't, so we are responsible for it over here.
Children need a future, and at the moment it doesn't look like they've got one. I think it is that brutal, so that's why I'm here.
It is not a secret that COP26 is a failure. It should be obvious that we cannot solve a crisis with the same methods that got us into it in the first place. And more people are starting to realize this. Many are starting to ask themselves, what will it take for the people in power to wake up? But let's be clear, they are already awake. They know exactly what they are doing. They know exactly what priceless values they are sacrificing to maintain business as usual. The leaders are not doing nothing. They are actively creating loopholes and shaping frameworks to benefit themselves and to continue profiting from this destructive system. This is an active choice by the leaders to continue to let the exploitation of people and nature and the destruction of present and future living conditions to take place. The COP has turned into a PR event where leaders are giving beautiful speeches and announcing fancy commitments and targets, while behind the curtains, the governments of the global north countries are still refusing to take any drastic climate action. It seems like their main goal is to continue to fight for the status quo. And COP26 has been named the most exclusionary COP ever. This is no longer a climate conference. This is now a global North greenwash festival. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. The most affected people in the most affected areas still remain unheard. And the voices of future generations are drowning in their greenwashed and empty words and promises. But the facts do not lie, and we know that our emperors are naked. To stay below the targets set in the Paris Agreement and thereby minimizing the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control, we need immediate, drastic, annual emission cuts unlike anything the world has ever seen. And as we don't have the technological solutions that alone will do anything even close to that, that means we will have to fundamentally change our society. And this is the uncomfortable result of our leaders' repeated failure to address this crisis.
Enough is enough, but it's never enough. Enough is enough, it's all that you need. Enough is enough, but it's never enough. Enough is enough, it's all that you need. Enough is enough, but it's never enough. Enough is enough, it's all that you need.
Another world is possible, the cry we heard from so many. Some of the best events we went to were organised by Stop Ecocide, the campaign to make ecocide a crime in international law. We heard Ralph Chammy, believe it or not, from the IMF, talk about the true value in economic terms of, among other examples, elephants, blue whales and even seagrass. At the moment, they are priced as effectively worthless. Chammy argues that this has to change if we're to transform the global economic system from one of extraction and destruction to one of protection and shared prosperity.
Nature, right now in the current system, nature has a price of zero. But we know that nature is valuable to our economic system. So the price cannot be zero. So it's been mispriced, if you like. Once you recognize the value of nature, that price cannot be zero. It's much bigger than that. But that means once you price that services correctly, as close as you can get, suddenly the markets would look at this and say, wait a minute, this is a new class of assets. This is a new source of wealth for societies where nature exists. But now you're talking about protecting nature, because that value only accrues if nature is thriving and is healthy. So now you move from an extractive view of nature, which is about killing, chopping down, extracting, to keeping nature, regenerating nature, protecting it, allowing it to grow. As it grows, it generates income. As it grows, it generates jobs. As it grows, it generates shared prosperity. And it's a win-win model. Everybody inside the tent no one is left outside.
I mean, we've already lost 60% of animal populations. We've lost 40% of plants. It just beggars belief why we can continue at the rate we are doing. And what we really need is for government just to be getting together with big business and big finance and taking this seriously. Until that happens, and until we actually manage to find a way to restructure the economy, it's just going to be business as usual. People will just carry on buying stuff that they don't need, going on holidays that they don't need, and hard as it may seem, we do have to find a new way to live, and we need to do it now. We can't really afford to wait for year after year for people to get the message. They really need to be cracking on with it now.
The importance of nature was at the heart of the First Nation people's message to COP Glasgow. First Nation peoples constitute 5% of the world's population and are custodians of 80% of its biodiversity. And yet, their lands are being destroyed. Moy travelled to COP from the Amazon forest, his people having only made contact beyond the forest in the past few decades. We managed to hear him speak in one of the lobbies outside the conference halls.
Mi mensaje esta noche es decirles que hay un gobierno que nos está matando en el país. Están poniendo nuevas empresas petroleras, contaminan nuestros ríos, están matando a nuestros animales y parte de eso pues nos están haciendo extinguir a nosotros también. Vengo del lugar más biodiverso del mundo, un sitio en el que el gobierno le dio nombre, nosotros no le dimos nombre porque ese es nuestro hogar. Y ese hogar tratamos de defender nosotros. Nosotros, o la mayoría de mi familia, nunca ha tenido estudios. Ellos nunca fueron a la escuela, no fueron al colegio ni universidades. Ellos todo lo que saben es parte de la naturaleza. Han crecido oyendo a los animales, cuentos, historias y todo eso. Y a pesar de todo ello, nosotros nos defendemos con ese conocimiento y queremos proteger nuestra tierra. Estoy muy feliz de que estén aquí, puedan oírme y puedan entender de que mi mensaje es la voz de mis abuelos, de todas las personas que nunca pudieron dar, el mensaje, nunca pudieron decir, miren, no están haciendo esto, así que gracias.
So thank you very much.
We caught up with Moy the following evening as First Nation people gathered in Queen's Park to bid their farewell to their Glasgow hosts.
Hacer nosotros del norte para ayudaros si hay algo que podemos hacer.
Creo que para mí ahorita lo único es entender que tenemos nuestros ancestros, nuestros pasados, y conocer parte de la historia es ayudarnos a nosotros.
It was sad to see First Nation delegates set off for the station the next morning, at the start of their long journey home. We were left to reflect on what we'd learnt and seen.
It felt to us that we all need to come together, put political differences to one side, make children and the health of the planet our top priorities. There was much we'd missed, like seeing the Greenpeace boat as it came up the Clyde. We tried to get into a conference about pensions. It sounds very boring, but actually it's incredibly important because of the amount of money that people have in pensions. In UK alone, there's £2.6 trillion. And in the world, the amount of money in savings, investments and all the rest of it is £100 trillion. It's an enormous amount and enough to make changes in many directions. Unfortunately, we didn't get into that conference. We didn't get past the first security check.
We were disappointed not only to miss Prince Charles admiring the hydrogen-powered train at Central Station, but also to get the benefit of more of his advice on conserving fossil fuels, such as that he offered on TV recently.
My old Aston Martin, which I've had for 51 years, runs on, can you believe this, surplus English white wine.
And we certainly didn't have enough time in all the great pubs. We managed to catch a great exhibition of skateboard climate art.
The photos of murdered climate activists from around the world, these being just from Colombia, reminded us that the new police bill legislation going through the UK Parliament right now threatens our freedoms too.
I actually think it's about connecting people up, and the experience I've had talking to people about climate change is normally you live in an echo chamber, right? So you work with people, you socialise with people who already know about climate change or care about climate change. But it's about reaching outside of that circle and speaking to somebody who doesn't come across it in the news, or they don't talk about it at the dinner table, and just explaining to them what it's about. And because people with an informed decision can see where you're coming from and perhaps just make small changes, or they go on to tell somebody else. And I think it's that kind of ripple effect. You just need to break outside of your normal day-to-day kind of social circles, and you'll reach people who perhaps don't know about it or haven't heard about it, which I think can make a really big change.
May I just say to all delegates, I apologise for the way this process has unfolded.
A cop in Edinburgh.
Did he just say Edinburgh?
Shall we just try that again, Prime Minister?
A cop in Edinburgh.
We found out that the biggest single group of delegates at the official conference was over 500 representatives of the fossil fuel industry. Frankly, it's completely hopeless leaving the situation to grown-up men in suits at these conferences. It has to be led by younger people and all the rest of us.
So I'm delighted now to be joined by Professor Kevin Anderson of the Tyndall Centre at the University of Manchester, one of the big leading thinkers around climate science over the years.
So if you're looking for leadership here, do not look for it in the older men with suits in the blue zone. Look for it outside of that, and you see much more leadership and drive there. And I always think we have to recognise that leadership is a partnership. It's not just something that's passed top down. It's a very messy blend of bottom up and top down. And so at the moment, I think that the top-down part has abdicated much of that responsibility, but the bottom-up part is demonstrating the sorts of levels of change that are necessary if we are to stay within 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade of warming.
It seems that the only way we're going to get out of this ghastly mess is if we all come together to work with each other and make it happen.
We need to make sure that accurate information is available to people, so that we can all understand the gravity of the situation.
Unfortunately, it's going to have to fall on the younger generation to take the lead. They're the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this. They're the ones who are left with the mess. No wonder they're getting angry.
We have to act. The only chance of pulling ourselves out of this planetary death spiral is getting together in massive numbers and making it impossible for governments not to act.
You can shove your climate crisis up your arse. You can shove your climate crisis up your arse. You can shove your climate crisis. You can shove your climate crisis. You can shove your climate crisis up your arse.
Heading for home, the last morning, with the sound of Glasgow's school children's voices echoing across the city. So was it a fair COP? One thing's for sure, we're all going to have to play our part here if anything is going to change. We can't just leave it to governments. We'll paste some useful links at the end of this video.
We can walk to school every day. We can walk to school every day. We can walk.
I think probably just if all of us do a little bit, then hopefully all together it makes a bigger change.